This is Tyrone Power, Jr. It's an honor for me to be able to talk about my father, Tyrone Power, on this, the 50th anniversary of his passing. He has always been somewhat of an enigma to me, as I never got the chance to meet my father. Although I was adopted at an early age by a loving and wonderful dad, my mother, Deborah Power Lowe, always made sure that I knew who my father was and what he did. Even though we didn't have video back then, I occasionally saw a film of his and marveled not only at his many exploits on film, but also at our uncanny family resemblance. Like my father, my grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather before him, I have chosen to continue the tradition of acting in our family. I'm extremely proud of that heritage, which goes back over 2 centuries. My father made his acting debut at age 7 in the part of Pablo, a Mexican lad in a mission play La Golondrina in San Gabriel, California. Later, he appeared in several high school plays before accompanying Tyrone Sr. to Chicago, where he got a small part in The Merchant of Venice. After honing his craft on the New York stage, he returned to California, where he came to the attention of a Hollywood scout who invited him to make a screen test. That eventually led to his long-term contract at 20th Century Fox. Over the years, I've had the pleasure of meeting many of the famous stars that became friendly with my dad during his years at Fox. I'll never forget the first time I got to meet Cesar Romero, who at the time was the Joker on the Batman television series. He and my father had gotten their start at Fox in the 1930s and starred together in the action-adventure film Captain from Castile. But I cared nothing of that. I only knew that I was meeting the Joker, and I got to have my picture taken with him. During my childhood, I was also fortunate to have known Henry Fonda, who gave me a lot of advice about acting. And that advice resulted in my moving to New York to study and perform in the theater. And of course, in my very first film project, Cocoon, I worked with Don Amici, an old friend and co-star of my father's. Don was a fascinating man, a real gentleman, and a lot of fun to be around. We often talked about my father and the irony of the two of us working together so many years later.
When the war came, it changed a lot of lives in Hollywood. This was taken at Camp Pendleton near San Diego 4 days after it opened. That drill master is Private Tyrone Power.
During World War II, my father left Hollywood to serve in the military. Over the years, I've run into several men who served with him when he was in the Marines, and they were keen on telling me what a down-to-earth guy he was. To them, he was just another one of the guys, no pretension at all, and that was the way he wanted it. And it really meant a lot to them that he was such a good friend and soldier. When I watch him in the war films he made before going off to fight, I can really sense his pride in wearing a uniform. He took the honor very seriously. My dad always said he became a star before he really became an actor, and because of his family heritage, he was always driven to improve. He fought tooth and nail to be able to play Stanton Carlyle in the film noir classic Nightmare Alley, and I think it's one of his most fascinating portrayals. It was also his personal favorite, because he got to play against his matinee idol looks.
What's use? Happy 1 minute, hungry and heartbroken the next. Every boy has a dog. Every boy has a beautiful old gray-haired mother. Everybody except maybe me.
What happened to her?
Oh, what do you care?
My father never bought into his own stardom, or at least never took it too seriously. I found among his things the beginning of an autobiographical manuscript he was writing. Just a few pages. He never got around to finishing it. It was entitled Destroy the Monster. The monster was his own Hollywood image, the myth. Perhaps most important to me is the reaction I've gotten from co-stars, friends, and even strangers who had chance encounters with him. And they all say the same thing. He engaged people with his generosity, kindness, and sense of humor, and left everyone feeling better for having met him. Although I didn't know him, that's something I try to carry with me when I'm in a film or on stage or just walking through life. And it's something I try to pass along to my own son, Tyrone Power V. And so the Power line goes on with great hope and pride and great admiration for this consummate actor and extraordinary man who still touches us all. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my sister Taryn, who will give you her perspective on our famous father.
Thanks, Tyrone. Hi, everyone. This is Tyrone Power. It is such a pleasure for me to be able to share some thoughts with you about my life and my father, Tyrone Power. I grew up mainly in Italy. I attended boarding school for about 11 years in 5 different countries and 4 different languages. He was very famous in Italy, perhaps because my mother, Linda Christian, married him in Italy in 1949 amidst a flood of press coverage and public jubilation. Although they divorced in 1955, over the years my mom has told me more and more about him. They met by chance in 1948, as my mother was traveling through Rome on her way to Switzerland. When her younger sister Ariadna discovered that Tyrone Power was staying in the same hotel, she freaked out and had to have an autograph. My mother was invited to collect it in my father's suite, and she says that when she knocked on his door, all the bells in Rome rang at once. It was a coup de foudre, like the French say, love at first sight. Theirs was a great passion, ignited with the complicity of the city of romance, par excellence, Rome. You know, people often ask me about my earliest memory of my father, and sadly, I have very few. I remember holding on to a man's back in our pool on Copa de Oro. The abundance of coppertone made it hard for me to get a grip, and there was a potent smell of eucalyptus in the air. He loved to swim and have fun around the pool. As you can see in some of these old home movies, he was quite a clown. But mainly my vision of my father comes from watching his films. When I was little and I would see movies of my father, I didn't see an actor playing a part. All I could see was Daddy. Later, there were times when I would look at him from a different perspective. Sometimes I thought he overacted. Sometimes I was embarrassed when he kissed another woman. Sometimes I thought I could see what many women saw in him. I found him especially attractive in Jesse James. I mean, he was just so good looking in that picture. He had his hair tousled, and he had this youthful, dynamic demeanor that captured his amazing spirit and zest for life.
Oh, you talked things over, did you? And who are you? The captain of this band? Who's handling these jobs, you or me or somebody else? Well, I'll tell you if you don't know, it's me. I'm doing it, see? And I'll ride up the Capitol steps if I feel like it.
But the funny thing is, since I was watching most of his films for the first time in Italy, they were all dubbed in Italian. So I don't remember hearing his voice until I was around 15 years old. Well, that really made an impression on me. We were living in a villa off the Appian Way in Rome, and somehow we'd gotten a hold of a recording of my dad reading poems by Byron. I was very moved, and it wasn't until that moment that I realized how much I missed him. I know my father's big 3 passions were acting, reading books — he collected first editions and limited editions — and he loved flying. But as far as acting goes, well, he took that very seriously. I hope that more people will continue to discover his vast talents through the release of his films on DVD and in revival theaters across the country. And now, I'd like to introduce another very special person in my life. My sister, Romina Power.
Hello everyone, this is Romina Power, and I'm so happy to be able to share some thoughts of my father with you. Today the name Tyrone Power is synonymous with the classic films he starred in, but to me, he's not a movie star, but simply Dad. Although I was 7 years old when he died in 1958, I really have no memory of him at all. It seems I have removed the memory, possibly to compensate for the loss. Still, thanks to the miracle of film, I'm able to see my dad at many different stages in his life. Through this medium, I'm able to see what he looked like, how he moved, how he smiled, his gestures. Whenever I watch one of his films, I feel closer to him. I think his performance in The Razor's Edge is quite magical, and his character's quest was, I think, quite similar to his own.
What has brought you here, my son?
I've come to learn. Ever since the war, I've been searching for something that I've not been able to put into words.
My dad had a real passion for flying. He flew for the Marines during the war, and in 1947 he bought a DC-3 from Howard Hughes.
Landing in Milwaukee, the plane is flown by a Hollywood star. A twin-engine Beechcraft piloted by Tyrone Power. Passengers...
And with Cesar Romero, Bob Buck, and another 3 friends, he flew all around South America and Africa, landing on improvised runways, often being surrounded and greeted by festive tribesmen. And on the way back from his long trip, he managed to land his plane after flying for about 7-8 hours with 3 inches of ice on the wings. When he died in 1958, Henry King, instead of attending the funeral, preferred to fly his plane over the gravesite as a final salute to his friend. When I look back on his career, I realize that he could have stuck to the swashbuckling genre and done just fine, but he constantly measured himself with new challenges as an actor. He longed for more substance in his scripts. So in the 50s, he returned to the stage. He worked in New York and in London, where he really proved himself. He was also one of the first Hollywood stars to form his own independent company, Copa Productions, and he acquired several projects that I'm sure would have been made had he not passed away so soon. You see, my dad had much, much more to give than what appears on the silver screen. I'm heartened by the fact that his fans have not forgotten him. The release of this second box set of his films proves that. Truth be told, I think my father would not only like to be remembered as a great actor, but also as the wonderful, warm human being that he was. He really was special.